He felt at that stage that his striving was progressing very quickly and fearlessly. When performing the regular morning and evening chanting, he did it in a brief form, for his mind was in a hurry to get on to striving with mindfulness and wisdom. He even stopped reciting the various sutta texts, which he previously chanted, in order to put all his effort into developing his mindfulness and wisdom so as to gain freedom as quickly as possible while there was still time. He was afraid that he would die before he got to his desired goal, the Arahata Dhamma. Path 2. Dhamma Pūjā. When Ajaan Khao lived in the forests and the mountains, he got the local villagers to lay out 3 different paths for walking meditation. He walked Chankama on these 3 paths at 3 different times each day. In the early afternoon, he started walking on the path dedicated to Dhamma Pūjā, the completely pure Citta. A bad fever afflicted Ajaan Khao the following vassa, but his relentless efforts against the kilesas continued. Neither side would back down. The fever remained with him throughout the vassa, but his examination of the painful feelings in the body, which is the home of suffering, never weakened or gave way. However strong the fever and however much the suffering, it was as though they acted as fuel for mindfulness and wisdom, causing them to show their skillfulness to the utmost. His heart took up the pain that arose from the fever in his body, which was the basis of his suffering, and used those painful feelings like a boxing ring to stage a fight against the kilesas, which were so punishing they gave no break for rest at the end of each round. If mindfulness and wisdom had relaxed or given way, the fever would have lain him out cold and probably killed him. So he and his kilesas fought together in the manner of a life or death struggle. Neither the fever nor his suffering eased or gave way at all, so his striving could not give way either. If he gave way, he could not keep up with the kilesas and destroy them, so the outcome depended on his diligent effort. As there was no way he could avoid the situation, he was forced to keep on struggling until he understood the reasons behind his suffering. Only then was he able to be victorious and gain confidence in his ability. That vassa was extremely difficult. Because he suffered malarial fever throughout the whole retreat period, he was required to push himself to the limit, both physically and mentally. The physical pain was excruciating, while in his heart he was striving relentlessly to follow the fever and the painful feelings. After the end of the vassa, his fever gradually subsided and went away. He then left and went wandering in solitude, going from place to place as it suited his inclinations, without attachment to anything except only his efforts in meditation. It was then the season when the rice was harvested. One evening, after he swept the ground around his hut, he went off to take a bath. As he was walking along, he saw how the rice growing in the fields was golden yellow and almost ripe. This immediately made him think and question. This rice has sprouted and grown because there is a seed which caused it to grow. The heart that endlessly leads one to birth and death must also have something that acts as a seed within it in the same way the rice plants have. If that seed in the heart is not destroyed entirely, it is bound to lead to further births and deaths going on endlessly. Now, what is this seed in the heart? What could it be but the kilesas of avidya, tanha, and upadana? He continued thinking and probing into this problem, taking avidya as the target of his research. He investigated it by going forward and then backward and then forward, examining it over and over again with intense interest, trying to understand the true nature of avidya. Beginning at dusk and continuing throughout the night, he went on relentlessly investigating the relationship between avidya and the citta. At dawn, just as it was beginning to get light, his wisdom was able to break through to a final conclusion. Avidya then fell away from the citta without any remainder. The contemplation of the rice stopped at the point where the rice was ripe, never to sprout again. His investigation into the citta also stopped as soon as avidya ceased, after which the citta became ripe in the same way as the rice became ripe. At that point, it was clearly evident to him that the Citta had stopped creating any more births in the various realms of existence. What remained for him to admire to his complete satisfaction, as he sat in his hut in the midst of the mountains, was the complete and utter purity of the Citta. At the moment the Citta passed beyond the tangled jungles of the round of Kilesas, Kilesavatta, wonder and amazement arose in him as he sat alone at dawn. Then the sun began to shine brightly in the sky, while his heart began to get brighter and brighter as it left the realm of avidya and went towards the wonder of Dhamma, where it reached Vimutti, freedom, as the sun rose above the mountains. It was truly a most auspicious and wonderful occasion. After this supremely auspicious and blessed moment had passed, it was time for him to go Pindapata. While he was walking away from that auspicious place, he looked back at the little hut that had provided him with so much happiness and such wonders. Then, looking all around him, he saw how everything else appeared to have become supremely auspicious in sympathy with his heart, which was entirely and completely wonderful throughout. Although, in fact, all these things were simply there in accordance with their own nature as usual. While walking on Pindapata, his heart was filled with Dhamma. When he looked at the local forest people who had looked after him, it seemed almost as if they were all divine beings. He reflected on all the assistance they had so graciously given him, and he felt that it would be impossible to describe the extent of their virtue. Metta and compassion arose in him for those heavenly forest people. He could not help but spread out the metta in his citta as a dedication to them as he passed by them along the route, which he did until he reached the vicinity of the hut where he stayed, which was a place of such happiness. While he arranged the simple food which the hill people had put into his bowl, his heart was full of Dhamma. He did not turn his thoughts to the food that had always sustained his body, but he merely ate it as that which the body depended upon for its maintenance. He later recalled, "Since the day I was born, this was the first time that I had ever experienced the body and mind in perfect harmony with the citta, which is something quite impossible to explain. All I can say is that it was a most wonderful and unique experience that became the most outstanding event of my life, leaving a deep and lasting impression on my heart. After this world-shaking event occurred, when the sky and ground collapsed, and the wheel of samsara, the Vattachakra in the heart, broke up and disappeared, all the elements and khandhas, as well as every part and aspect of the citta, were all free to conform to their own natural state. They were no longer enslaved or forced into service by anything. The 5 Indriya and the 5 Ayatana will continue to function and do their duties until they disappear at death, but there won't be any dispute between them as there was in the past." The dispute he referred to is the disharmony between internal sense bases and external objects when they come into contact. This contact in turn gives rise to gladness or sorrow, that then turns into the arising of sukha and dukkha. All these are interconnected like the links of an endless chain going on forever. The disputes within the citta, which are far more numerous and disturbing than those externally in the world, all stopped at the moment the court of justice was finally established within the heart. Such troublesome disputes used to take the citta as the arena where they would dance about, arguing and quarreling. The citta was never given any time to be calm and quiet, because avidya tanha, the boss, directed and ordered it to cause turmoil and confusion of countless different kinds. But now all of that has dissolved into a joyful, harmonious state of peaceful calm. The world within the citta is now free and empty. Now only the most superb and excellent truths of Dhamma, Vidya Dhamma, are produced there, which allows me to enjoy the realm of the Citta king, instead of the former state of anti-Dhamma. Affairs, both external and internal, now proceed smoothly in accordance with Dhamma without being harassed and disturbed by an enemy. So the eyes see, the ears hear, the nose smells, the tongue tastes, the body feels things hot or cold, soft or hard, and the heart receives and knows the various supporters of perception, aramana, in its natural way, without distorting and altering everything as it used to, making out that right is wrong, that being shackled is freedom, that what is bad is good, that ghosts are people, that virtuous bhikkhus are evil ghosts, preta, and conversely that evil ghosts are good people. That is what the Lord of Anti-Dhamma used to do when he had the power to dictate. Now I can simply sit down and rest peacefully, knowing that whether I live or die, I have complete happiness. I am genuinely free of dukkha and free of danger, without any residue of attachment of any sort whatsoever. This was the aphorism that Venerable Ajaan Khao exclaimed in his heart at that time. Ajaan Khao was one of several of Venerable Ajaan Mun's disciples who stripped away all dukkha and got rid of all dangers from his heart while living and practicing in Chiang Mai province. He said, "The place where I practiced the way until I reached freedom from the dukkha within me made a strong impression on me. There was the little hut which gave me shelter so I could practice and strive and also rest my body, the paths where I walked chankama, the place where I sat in samadhi meditation day and night, and the village where I walked for pindapata to get food for maintaining my body. All of them made a great impression that went deep into my heart in an inexplicable way, far more so than any other place I ever lived at. This feeling has remained buried in my heart right up to the present day, and my memory of that place has never faded or become dull and stale. From the moment when the wheel of samsara was demolished and fell away from my heart, that place changed and became the abode of supreme happiness in all situations at all times. It was as if I were in the presence of the Lord Buddha at the place of his enlightenment, and every other place where he practiced, striving for Dhamma. All uncertainty about the Lord Buddha was swept away at that moment. Even though he entered Parinibbana a long time ago, as reckoned by the usual conventions of time, yet it seems as though he is residing here in my heart every moment, as though he had never entered Parinibbana at all. All of my uncertainties about the true nature of Dhamma, whether it is much or little, profound or shallow, gross or subtle, were entirely swept away. I understood that Dhamma is permanently established in this one heart, and that this Dhamma is complete in and of itself without any deficiencies whatsoever. All doubt and uncertainty disappeared concerning the Savaka Sangha, which is Supatipanno. These three jewels of absolute purity are fused into one in the heart that lives with Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, each of which are pure and integrated together as one Dhamma. From that time on, I have remained completely contented with no concerns or worries deceiving my heart. Whatever my circumstances, I am my own master in that situation. Nothing remains to order me about or to creep in and ask for a share of everything like a parasite, as when I was living with that beggar all the time without realizing it. First it wanted this, then it wanted that. It was always pleading for something. When Ajaan Khao spoke of wanting this and wanting that, he was talking about the kilesas, whose basic nature is to always feel needy and unsatisfied. Once they have established a powerful position in the heart of a person or animal, they are bound to demand or beg incessantly, for this is their natural way of acting. They constantly incite us to think like this, or to speak like that, or to act in various ways according to their power. If we don't have the Dhamma needed to prevent the leakage which comes from the stubborn demanding and begging of this gang of kilesas, we are likely to be divided up as spoils so that they can eat us up until there is nothing left. It can even reach the point where we don't have enough virtue left to enable us to be born again in the future as a good person with moral principles. Wherever we are reborn, it is bound to be the wrong place and the wrong situation. We won't be able to get sufficient contentment in our next birth to justify the effort we made to be born into such a state. Then we will have lost not only our capital, but the interest from it as well. In other words, when we are heedless and complacent, we grant the kilesas the power to take complete charge of the citta without having any defense to resist them at all. They then take over and grab until there's nothing left. But those who get rid of all their debts and put an end to the untidy mess in their hearts continue to live happily in all the activities of their khanthas. When life comes to an end, they drop the burden of the khanthas. All that remains is the purity of Buddha. This is the complete and eternal end of all dukkha, a wonderful ending and a moment of far greater value than anything in the three worlds. It is quite different from existence in the world of conventions, sammati, where most beings openly desire birth and are not in the least interested to consider the dukkha which is bound to come as a consequence of that birth. The truth is that birth and dukkha cannot be separated. Even in those cases where it is minimal, dukkha is still bound to be there. The wisest of men are therefore far more afraid of birth than they are of death. By contrast, most of us fear death more than birth, but death is simply a result of its basic cause, which is birth. This fear of death is a fear that is in complete opposition to the basic principles of nature, and it comes about because people have no interest in searching out the truth about death. Indeed, they resist it, so dukkha is with them all the time. If the wisest of men had the kind of kilesas that made them laugh at others' foolishness, they would probably be unable to contain themselves and may have to let it all out to their heart's content when they see almost everyone in the world setting themselves against the truth with such determination, without ever looking around to search for the basic principles of truth. But actually, the truly wise do not act in the usual way of the world. They have only metta and compassion for the world, giving help by teaching the way. As for those who are beyond all hope, the wise let them go their way, as nothing can be done to help them. Venerable Ajaan Khao transcended all the fear and danger that he used to have in samsara and reached Nibbana while still alive, Sahupadise Nibbana, when living in a place called Longkot in the Phao district of Chiang Mai province, in his 16th or 17th vassa. I cannot remember which, but I do know that it was the beginning of the harvest season just after the end of the vassa period. He related the whole story to me in a manner that touched the heart one evening, as we discussed Dhamma from 8 p.m. until after midnight. Because nobody came to disturb us for the whole of that time, both of us were able to talk Dhamma freely, right through to the final conclusion, which was the final result that arose from our practice of Dhamma. We started from the basic ABCs of our respective practices, which meant the basic training that we did, which was a mixture of slipping back and scrambling up again, at times falling into a bad state, or a state that alternated between bad and good, and at other times feeling the satisfaction or dejection which resulted from the ups and downs of the practices that we used in our initial training. We went on right through our meditation until we each reached the ultimate and final point of the Citta and Dhamma. The results of my discussion with him were so satisfying that I have taken the opportunity to include his comments in this book, so that those who read it and are interested in attaining Dhamma may use it as a field for contemplation. They can then choose which aspects are suitable for them to use in their own practice, depending on their own temperaments. The result which comes from such a discriminating choice is likely to be a smooth and steady development that is right and appropriate, depending on the strength of one's resolve. Ajaan Khao was entirely qualified to be a constant source of great value for those in the world who associated with him. His outward behavior was impeccable, as was his inward knowing of the way of Dhamma, which was like a diamond of the first water buried deeply within him. Such a precious gem is extremely hard to find, and can only be found by someone who has returned from the threshold of death. I have secretly given him the name Diamond of the First Water in the Kammatthana lineage of Venerable Ajaan Mun, without being afraid that people will call me mad, because this arose from my own faith